Hello.
Hi everyone.
Hello. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
You good?
Yeah, it's nice to be here. Really nice to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you this evening. Actually, before we start, I saw your artwork, Here We Come, Here We Rise, on the M1 at Brent Cross for the first time the other month. I drove past it. Well, no, actually, I didn't drive past it. I can't drive, which is embarrassing to admit on stage. But it is massive. I don't know if anyone, maybe some of you haven't seen it, but it's a wrap around electricity substation, right? There's images of it on the screen in a second. It's bigger than the Angel of the North, right? Is that true?
It's bigger or equal to, something like that. I can't remember. Well, in notes somewhere, but yeah, it's, yeah.
And is it weird? Do you feel responsibility for it? Do you visit it often and wake up worrying about it?
I have a license, but I don't drive either.
Okay, great. So we're in it together.
So I don't get to see it that often, but people tell me about it, which is really nice. And that was a collaboration with architects, IFDU, I should say. So it wasn't me on my own. Involved a lot of people making that happen. But yeah, it's a really special one, that.
I think also when news broke about it, I remember seeing this statistic. I looked up again, actually, before this interview. It was estimated that 6 million people would see it every year by car and train, which is incredible numbers. Something I wanted to ask you about that is sort of what kinds of spaces you want to make for people, because 6 million people, there's millions of people every year seeing that on their commute, and it's shaping their, their daily, basically their day to day. What kind of spaces do you want to make for people? What do you kind of think of as an ideal space when you think in that way?
I guess I think a lot about when people ask why I make work. What reason it started out of a place of feeling like life was really difficult and trying to make something that was hopeful out of that. So in terms of the spaces that I want to make, I guess I want to make spaces that give hope, that point to hope for people.
And then also, I guess a huge part of it is like, also that is a direct impact thing. Like so many people, some of the first things they say about your work is color or how visually impactful it is. I just did talking about the size of that substation. I kind of like to go back a second to understand that a little bit. What are some of the earliest kind of visual memories you have or references that really impacted you growing up? Can you remember any? That's also quite a hard question.
Yeah.
I'm asking you to remember when you're like 5 or whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, actually, because someone was asking me, what are your inspirations?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And often when people ask that, if you're not in the headspace, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Color, I don't know. But I was thinking about it the other day, and I realized that I was thinking about Sesame Street, actually. Not that that's necessarily the biggest, but I was thinking about Sesame Street. I don't know how many of you guys watched Sesame Street growing up.
I'm a big fan.
But I was thinking about it. It was great, the old ones. And what was noticeable about it was that the words, they made a really big thing of each letter of the day or the letter and the number. And it was incredible, basically, that just the visuals in there. So I think that was things like that. I think when I think about what has had an impact on me, and sometimes people are like, oh, what artist do you like, or what kind of art do you like? Definitely the stuff that's impacted me more has been stuff that is just part of our everyday visual culture, which probably in this gathering, most of us will probably feel that way. Things like, like music, for instance, music album covers, adverts that I might have seen in my brother's basketball magazines, that type of thing. So there was nothing. I didn't have like a super cultured upbringing or anything, but I think just those kind of everyday things that I was gathering. I remember random things like my dad. In one of his jobs, he had a lot of jobs, and he had a folder of business cards, quite old school. It was like kind of long, I think it was probably 2 by 4 business cards, with like plastic wallets. And I remember looking through that as a child. I was probably about 7, and really interested in like the bits that were embossed, the gold bits, the flags, So I think little memories like that. It was always words, typography. That was always what captured my attention.
Yeah, because it's interesting what you're saying there, like song lyrics, slogans, Sesame Street, the best example of those. So often in your work, I mean, there's a lot of protest imagery, banners are a big theme, but then there is song lyrics, like, I feel like some of them are like Florence and the Machine, Karen and Lee, What is it about song lyrics? What do they give you? Like, what about that kind of helps you in a visual context? And especially when we think about like protest images, there being so direct messaging, like comparing that in comparison to how open song lyrics are, or like how many different ways a pop song could be taken. Yeah, what about song lyrics is that really helps you in your practice?
I think, so I come from quite a musical background.
Yeah.
Like, I was always singing growing up. My mum was always singing, our family's always sung. Music is really important part of, like, I guess, our family culture. And I think the interesting thing about songs is the way that they repeat, It's almost like a mantra. It's also something that people do together in unison. And you repeat a verse or you repeat a chorus. It's a really, it's almost kind of meditative. And I think there's something really powerful about that, thinking about what you're singing, the messages that you're singing. When you think about the songs that we sing in our culture, the songs that we just play on the radio, the things that we're hearing again and again. So I think the reason that, so I just connect with song lyrics. I think they're beautiful. And I also love the fact that they are something that people can connect with. And I think a lot of my work has been trying to find ways of connecting with people. And that's what songs do. And I always sang growing up. And my sister actually, she went down that path and became a musician. But in a way, my work has become almost like a visualization of song, in a way.
Okay.
To some extent.
Yeah, and it's interesting there because you're saying it's kind of almost not even like the words of the lyric, it's that recognition that we have. Yeah, nice. I think maybe jumping forward now, we've talked a little bit about the artwork at Brent Cross, but then you've also transformed a juvenile detention centre in Arkansas, basketball courts there, recently the front steps at Christie's, the auction house. So obviously hugely different clients, I can imagine super different demands. But what's a good commission for you in your mind? What makes a good canvas for a public artwork?
That's a great question. It's nice when there's creative freedom, obviously. Boundaries are also good as well, though. Sometimes someone says you can do whatever you want, and you're like, it's just too blank. The canvas is too blank. I think, like in terms of like a dream commission or dream project, I'm really interested in things that involve community. One of my favorite projects that I worked on was for Fiorucci. And it was...
Oh, yeah, it was a zine, right? That might be a bit more recent one.
It was a whole collection.
Right.
And they basically gave me a lot of creative freedom. It was a bit chaotic, like the whole way. It wasn't like kind of a well-oiled machine, it was quite... But I designed the collection... and then we also did a shoot. We worked with this photographer, Ruth Osai, who's a friend. And again, it was related to music, actually. My sister was part of a choir growing up. And so we did like a reunion of the choir.
Oh, nice.
And they wore the clothes. So we did it at a local community center. The whole thing, it was so much fun because it really felt like holistic. And it was about the clothes, the patterns on the clothes, obviously, but it was also about the community that came together to make this thing happen. And then we made a zine that kind of documented it. But that, for me, was amazing to work on. A lot of work, involved, so many layers, but so much fun because, it connected in so many ways, not just an image, but in all these ways. It brought people together.
I think also when you were speaking then, something that came to mind that I think about all the time with your work is that images of, specifically like looking at an image kind of level, hands always come up for me in your work. And also when we're thinking, like you were saying there about a community, these hands are often like outstretched, reaching out, and they always stand out because they're quite figurative in these like very graphic, against these very graphic backdrops. Where has that come from for you? Is it quite instinctual to be drawing hands?
Where's it come from? I think hands are there and I use them so much in my work. I think, obviously I'm doing stuff with my hands. That's where it came from, really. I think the first time I used the hands was in a painting, obviously. I did a painting in my home. I took over my home, basically. During COVID, during lockdown, I painted my home. So I made these paintings. I hung them on the walls. I painted murals around them. And in one of the paintings, it read, "This will be a safe space." And it had these two hands reaching down, I think. And I don't know why at that point I decided to put them in, but it just felt like I needed to do that, and I think I wanted to move beyond just words, I painted 2 portraits many years ago, like in 2011, I think. And so that was the first time I was painting something figurative, but it was really nice. And then I made a series of paintings about basketball called the Jump Paintings. And again, hands obviously are a big part of basketball, so I decided to use the hands in that as well. And it made sense to me because it was this idea of connection, and hands can really be a beautiful way of conveying that, and also salvation is a theme that comes up in my work, and the hands were coming down, from above. And I think these are some of the themes that I've been like playing with and kind of exploring and thinking of ways of communicating that, basically.
It's so true what you were saying about jump paintings there, because they do show up differently. Like the fact that in that series it looked like they had just thrown a basketball. There was like a lot of different aspects there. Maybe for people who don't know about jump paintings, could you tell us a little bit about why you were thinking about basketball during that time?
Yeah, so basically you mentioned the Juvenile Detention Center in Arkansas. So I was commissioned to basically take over this really grey, depressing courtyard in a juvenile detention center. And I painted that, and there was a basketball hoop in there. So I painted that, that area, little basketball area. And then a couple years later, I was commissioned to create artwork for some big basketball courts, also in Arkansas. And it basically got me thinking about basketball, and I'm always interested in, the reason for the song lyrics and music is that it's, like I said, it's a way of kind of connecting with people. And basketball, again, seemed like a kind of universal thing that people connect with. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll make a series of paintings exploring this further. And I ended up making these kind of abstract portraits of different NBA legends. And so, they involved the hands. And it was about basically using it as a way, as a metaphor for thinking about flight, jumping, hope, aspiration, dreaming, all of those types of things that I'd been exploring before.
I also didn't know, from that series, I learned from seeing those series of paintings, that the dunk was banned in 1967 for like almost a decade, right?
Yeah, it was.
And I did those paintings were kind of also about celebrating the heights of that movement, and also kind of maybe some of the politics that went into that decision, right, to ban the dunk.
Yeah. It was interesting. Yeah, learning about it, basically learning about the game, and I guess the politics involved in it. So it was trying to be this kind of celebration of that, celebration of it was predominantly black men in terms of the players, and trying to celebrate this joyful, incredible kind of thing that they do in terms of how they play and how it's shaped the game. So that was definitely an element of it as well.
I think also, so often I kind of really learn a lot of historical things through some of your series. This is a bit of a different leap, but your series last year at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, A Green and Pleasant Land, that was sort of, it is called in inverted. It's not. I'm not actually laughing at the series name. That was kind of an inspiration behind that was a fence, right? Or one of the inspirations behind that. Could you maybe just give us a bit of context about that series and also that historical image, basically?
It was really fun to work on because it was like. So they invited me, to Yorkshire Sculpture Park to do a show, and I was like, okay, what do I do? And while I was there, I found a map. And just the standard map, not like a secret map. There was a map
in the back room.
To a secret treasure.
This interview's about to go somewhere different.
But there was a map on the leaflets they give out, and there was something labelled on it called a ha-ha. And some of you might know, I vaguely knew because there's a road in Woolwich called Ha-Ha Lane.
Right, okay.
And I think I'd seen it before and I'd been like, okay, this is like an ancient Old English term. But it means a sunken ditch. And basically, so I noticed this on a thing and I was like, okay, there's a couple of them here. And it turned out that... a ha-ha is a sunken ditch which was used in English landscape gardening, I think 19th century, as a way of keeping out intruders or animals. And if you were in the big house, looking out, you would have a ha-ha built or dug, like it's like a trench, dug, and it was discreet, so you couldn't see it from the house. But obviously, if you walked, boom, a bit like this stage, if you walked, you'd suddenly drop. So you would know it was there. But it meant that no one could get in, but your beautiful landscape wasn't messed up, the vision. And basically, I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And I basically ran with it and used it as a metaphor to think about how there can be boundaries in terms of speech that mean we can't say certain things, or we're having to kind of censor ourselves. There is an illusion of freedom. So that's what I was kind of exploring.
Because when I was like looking at Google images of ha-ha fences, this is maybe too much background now, I'm like telling you about my search history, but it really does give like an illusion of naturalness, like in a landscape. It's kind of wild.
If I had a manor house, I would have some ha-has.
Yeah.
It is. You just have this kind of perfect, it looks seamless. And that's what I was interested in. I was interested in using it as a metaphor for how I feel sometimes things are in terms of our culture, that there is this appearance of freedom and there's an appearance of openness, but sometimes there are these very clear boundaries that we can't pass, and I was interested in exploring that.
And what things were you noticing around that time? Like, if you were noticing that kind of feeling of restriction, or maybe there was a forced naturalness, was there any kind of specific things, or was it more like something's off and I feel that it is, and this was I
think it's kind of like, people speak a lot about polarization of political polarization.
Yeah.
And just thinking about growing up, and obviously I was a child a while back, but just thinking about as I've got older, as I've come to adulthood, how I've seen this kind of division of people. I did a project, I don't know if there's an image of it here, but where I created this stage. This was in Hull, in Humber Street Gallery, a couple of years before. So it was almost like a warm-up to Ha-Ha. And that was about, it was this stage that we built. I didn't build it, someone else built it. I drew it, someone built it. And I painted it. And it had 2 platforms. And the point I was trying to make was that it never actually ended up being a performance, but my intention was that there would be a performance, and that if only one stage was taken, there would always be an absence very evident, so people would see that there was only one side of the story being told. So that's kind of what the whole Ha Ha project was about. It was about genuine diversity, trying to point out that I don't feel there is genuine diversity in terms of how we speak. I feel like there's sometimes the appearance of diversity in terms of how we look, but in terms of what we think, sometimes we're all thinking the same thing. And that's kind of what I was trying to point out, question, challenge us to say, if we are the kind of the culture makers, the gatekeepers, are we making space for people who think differently from us? Not just who look different from us, but who think differently from us, So yeah, that was what it was about. It was very fun. I loved doing it because I was able to go a bit deeper,
Yeah, also in all the things you were saying there, I guess in Ha Ha exhibition, you kind of use slogans again to do that. There was very rigid statements, like do better, take notes, things that maybe we're used to seeing on Instagram, maybe that kind of thing.
That was the point.
Yeah.
And generally with my work, I try not to shout at people.
Yeah.
I try not to kind of tell people what to do or kind of preach at people. But these paintings were quite preachy and to me quite patronizing and condescending. And the whole point, I was kind of laughing at basically that kind of self-righteousness. And we had this soundscape of laughter, which was so much. I actually accidentally played it on my laptop the other day. And yeah, we gathered laughter from lots of different people and we had that playing. So it was kind of eerie, kind of weird, but this laughter playing as you looked all around. So yeah, it was really good.
Yes, that laugh track, I think I heard some of it online. It was donated by a lot of people, right? They donated their laughter.
Just people contributed their laughter. I recorded my son.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. I just kept making him laugh. Your kids are easy to make laugh. It was harder with adults. But yeah, loads of laughter. My friend Gowan Hewitt, who's a sound artist, he made a soundscape basically. So he kind of, brought them all together, curated them. We even had comic clips from comics and stuff. It was beautiful.
Also there, we've kind of just got a glimpse of it. You're working with sign designers. Your works are so large scale, not even just public artworks, but exhibitions, they're really sprawling in terms of scope. So often I'd imagine that you're directing half as much as you are also physically creating with architects, huge scales of people working on massive murals. What is that collaboration with lots of different voices like for you? Do you find the structure helpful? Is it quite nerve-wracking to have control spread across, broad teams? What's that like?
I guess it's just out of necessity I've had to do it, Sometimes it's annoying because I want to be more involved. Sometimes I'm not able to be as involved as I want to, as hands-on as I want to be. And when you're busy and you haven't got a lot of time, you've just got to delegate. You've got to, work as a team and get people to be your hands. But just kind of has to happen because you can't do it all on your own.
I think actually we're coming up to time, but we do have some questions from the audience if you're happy to answer some of those. Thank you for submitting those today, everyone. So the first is from Tony. Do you ever redo your murals or touch up colours, etc.? I always love seeing the Seven Sisters one every time I go by. Do you ever touch them up? The
Seven Sisters one needs a touch up.
Is that why?
So thank you for highlighting that. Is it Tony?
Tony's trying to say it's time to go.
It's a hint, right? The Seven Sisters one is filthy. It has been touched up once. I don't have time right now. But normally, if it's something like that, it would be the person who commissioned it. When it's a public artwork.
So it's not your fault.
It's actually the responsibility of whoever commissioned it to maintain it. But generally, like I was saying, in terms of being hands-on, increasingly now, like if it's something that's abroad, I'm not able to go and paint it. I've got to send a drawing. Although my plan is, in a couple of years when I have more time, to just find ways to make sure I am just going out and doing it. Even if it's not like kind of efficient or makes sense in terms of what I'm getting paid. Because it's just so much fun. Like, I miss it. Like when I've had times where I am, because now I've got 3 little kids, so I can't be just like going backwards and forwards. But it's just the most amazing thing. Like when you're, late at night in LA or in Vegas, and it's like it's hot at night, and you're just painting into the night. It's the most fun thing. So I definitely plan to go back to it, but just this season of my life, everything's got to be quite, I guess, efficient in a way, and kind of, I have to be like kind of shrewd about where I put my time.
Also, that made me think about how many of your artworks must be permanent. Like the longevity of some of these pieces must be massive. Are you sometimes, like, how old are some of the oldest ones that are up,
Well, to be honest, not all of them have been permanent. So the most permanent is probably the Brent Cross one.
Right, okay.
Which will hopefully be there. It could be there for 100 years, We don't know. And it's around a substation, so... Yeah, that's probably the most permanent one.
Right.
But a lot of them have been really ephemeral. Like they'd be up for a year, maybe up for a couple of years, and then they're repainted over, or that kind of thing, which I'm kind of cool with, because it's, other people maybe want to have the space for their voice to be there. And I'm just keeping it moving.
I would like if you were like, no one can ever make anything. Once you have been touched a space, that's it. It remains mine. Yeah. Okay, so Pete, there's a lot of maybe even sly digs in these questions here, has asked, what has been your biggest creative failure? Which is a good one.
Yeah, it's kind of a deep question, isn't it, to reveal all here. I think... It's a funny one, because basically there's projects that I'm not necessarily got on my website, for instance, because I'm not the biggest fan of them. But I wouldn't call them failures. I think so I don't really have a story to tell. It's just that I'm not that much a fan of how that came out. But I think I kind of make everything work, Not necessarily work to the extent that I'd want to show it up on that screen. But I make everything, whenever, if it is a commission, for instance, or a painting that I'm working on, I make it work. So it isn't really, I don't feel like there are failures, and that maybe sounds like not the greatest message, but I think you just make it work,
Yeah, and sometimes also there's success in other things. Sometimes success is like, it's finished,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't feel like, I think if it were a failure, maybe it just, the projects that never happened, maybe that's the failures.
Right.
But, I think projects that I'm not that much a fan of how they came out, I wrapped them up, finished them off, did them to a good enough level, and move on.
Yeah, that makes sense. A last one from the audience questions is, how did you get your first big break? Which I think is also quite interesting when you consider, like, how do people get into such large-scale public artwork? I think that is also,
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So, probably my first big break, I'm always able to answer this, is probably when I painted a mural in Miami in 2013
Right.
that read, "I Remember Paradise." And how did I get that? Basically, I studied graphic design, but I ended up making massive paintings. But then I graduated, and people didn't need massive paintings. They needed flyers, logos, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I started doing. And I just kept doing that. I'd do any job. I did sign writing. I did everything. But then a friend, one of my friend's friends had a gallery in LA, and she knew about my work, and she asked me to send those paintings that I'd made to LA. So we did that. I showed them there. I wasn't there, but I sent them. I don't know if I did get them back, but it took a long time. So I was like, okay. But then, about a few years later, she said, oh yeah, I know this guy who's like curating some walls in Miami. You know, do you want to be put forward for it? And I was like, yeah, this isn't going to happen, but okay. And then it actually happened. And so that's what it was. And because the paintings I'd made had been large scale, I mean, this was way big. This was like 132 foot long, 20 feet high, like proper, probably about as long as, you know, from there to there. Yeah.
It's quite a big first,
And about
like,
as high as
first
that.
one to go
I
in
know,
your first
I know.
mural.
So yeah, I basically just said, I can make, yeah, okay. I just always said yes.
Yeah.
You know, they say just always say yes and figure out how to do it. So that's what I did. And I made it happen. I was very scared, very scared. But, you know, I pulled it off. And not on my own. I had, like, the couple of people helping me to paint it. Mainly me and my friend who went out with me. So yeah, that was probably my first big break. And Beyonce actually took a picture in front of it. But annoyingly, she didn't tag me, so that didn't actually equate to anything. But it was just incredible that she took a selfie in front of that wall.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was probably the first thing. And then once I'd painted that, people knew that I could paint on that scale. And I think also when it happened, I think it was almost like I don't know when Instagram began, but it was probably like the early days of Instagram, before like the algorithm was trying to fight you, you know. It was like a time when it worked, you know, in terms of making big paintings. So I think the timing was quite good. People saw I could paint on that scale, and then they started to ask me to paint more on that scale, and it just kind of snowballed. So that was probably the big break. But it came from having done these other things. Do you know what I mean? It didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And
So like if you had said no to all of those other things, you would never.
That's what I mean.
You know.
Yeah. So it was kind of, and this friend's friend, I didn't know that she knew this guy who was curating this thing, you know. So like, she's not an artist. I didn't know it wasn't an obvious connection, but it happened. So yeah.
I think also we've spoken quite a lot. We've gone like back and forward a bit about your career today. I wanted to end with just one more question about what you're thinking about now, like what's on your mind right now, and kind of what bearing that's having on the things you're making or might make in the future.
What am I thinking about now? I'm thinking a lot about community, which is something that's always been a bit of a funny one for me, because I know it's like people love to talk about community, but I've always been somebody who's been kind of done things on my own, figured out things on my own, not being the most kind of extrovert person. So I think, but I think I've had these kids. I think partly having them has made me feel more connected to community in a way. And yeah, so that's what I'm thinking a lot about now. And in terms of the next project that I'm working on, it touches on community. I won't go into the details. But
Do go into the details, feel free.
I don't want to talk about it, but basically it's that idea. What I'm excited by is the potential to make these paintings, but to actually bring people into it, you know? And I know there are people who do that who I really admire, and I want to do that more and more. I think as I have more control over things. Even like I'm moving into a new studio space on Thursday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is it's a big space. It's local space, and I'm just excited about the idea of bringing people in more, bringing people into what I'm doing, and also, you know, talking more. You know, I was speaking about the ha-ha and this kind of polarization, but bringing people into the work and people from different walks of life, people who think differently, and sharing, you know, around the work. Because that's what it all started with for me. I made the work because I felt like I was marginalized in terms of society, and I was making the work because it was a space where I could speak, you know. And that's where it began. It's almost been a way for me to connect with society, me to kind of find a place, you know. So I think that's my vision for the work, is that it will bring people in more and connect with people and you know, sounds idealistic, but connect with people who are on the margins as well. That would be a dream. I can't say that I'm making it happen yet, but that would be my dream, that it would really bring people in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the remedy to like the half fence. It's like almost, you know, in a
Exactly.
way. Yeah. Okay.
So we'll see.
Fingers crossed. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming,
Thank
Lakwena.
you.
It's been lovely having you on the stage. A round of
Thanks.
applause for Lakwena.